Welcome to a very special edition of the Coaching Badges podcast, the last in season 5. Back in July, the wonderful people at St. Joseph's Football Club in Dublin invited myself and Mark to be part of an educational evening for their players and coaches. We were joined on the night by hundreds of incredible players, coaches, parents, club members, UEFA Pro licensed coach Ian Morris, as well as special guest Steve Salas, as we discussed all things coaching. Carol and Mick from Joe's were kind enough to allow us to use a part of the evening to record our first ever live podcast, for which we are forever grateful. Thanks to everyone who contributed to a brilliant night of socialising and learning. So without further ado, let's just crack on with the live show.
So I'm going to hand over to Gav for our Coaching Badges podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll just get settled there. Could I ask, I know we're a bit scattered, could we come up and become a bit closer? It'd be nice. So people at the back, would you mind just jumping up and making it feel a little cozier for the chat, if that's okay? If you don't want it, that's fine too. But yeah, it'd be lovely if everybody just comes a little closer. Thank you. Good evening. So look, firstly, thanks to Carol, to Mick, and to Steve for earlier. Steve, every time I listen to you, I enjoy it and I pick up something, so I really appreciate it. But thank you most of all to you guys for still being here. And to the players down there, I see lots of you. I hope you're enjoying it. Don't be afraid to ask the adults questions, because that's what it's all about, you guys getting the most out of this. So look, to put this in a little bit of context, myself, Mark, Mick, Paul, Willie, Tyrrell started a podcast in COVID because we were all stuck in our houses. We'd coached together for 5 or 6 years, and we were missing the kind of interaction that we used to have 4 or 5 times a week. So we started this thing called the Coaching Badges podcast. I'd run a Twitter page for years for coaches, just sharing information. Because when I started coaching in early 2000s, nobody shared anything. People kept their sessions secret. People thought that everything they had was theirs and they wouldn't share anything. So I thought, that has to change. I want to share everything. So I've always said to people, any sessions that I've ever delivered over the years, if any of you out there want them, I'll give them to you. Because Mark's a chef, and I always say it's just like if Mark hands me a cookbook, it doesn't make me a chef. I got to learn how to be a cook. So I can hand you all my sessions, and I've thousands of them, it doesn't make you a coach. You got to learn. But the important thing first is you start with getting the right information, and you start with understanding how to be a better coach than you were the day before. So it's that simple, right? So we've done this Coaching Badge podcast now for 5 years. It's listened to in it's crazy, 200 countries. There's thousands of people have reached out to us over the last number of years. And all we're trying to do is help educate coaches. People, no matter what level of the game they're at, whether they're just brand new to this, whether they're professional, whether they're experienced, whether they're working with boys or girls or kids that have special needs, it doesn't matter. If you're giving up your time to coach people, be good at it. So go and learn from people like Mick Brown. That's what we've done. Like, Mick's a mentor to all of us, and he gets embarrassed when we say that, but it's true. I wouldn't be coaching only for him. So you go and you do things like that, and you meet people like that, and in the football community, there are some phenomenal people. A lot of you are in the room. You all have people in your life that got you into coaching, that have kept you in coaching, and are helping you inspire other people. I met Bish's son, Alex, earlier, and there's a kid who's on his coaching journey. He's going to be a hell of a coach because already he recognizes that he needs to be better and wants to be better. So people like that are phenomenal, right? Tonight, I'm very fortunate to be joined by Mark, who's my friend and co-host on the podcast, Ian Morris. Ian has a phenomenal amount of experience in football, and I'll get the boys to introduce themselves briefly in a second. You've met Steve already. All we're hoping to do tonight is pull a few threads on what Steve has talked about and throw it open to you guys later to ask some questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Somewhere in the room is the answer, or somewhere in the room is pointing you in the right direction to go and get an answer. Is that fair enough? So look, we'll try and keep it short and snappy, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes. I'd appreciate if you could just stay tuned in. Don't be afraid to chime in. This is very informal. The whole idea of this is that we're sharing, we're learning. This is a phenomenal initiative by Joe's. It's the first time we've ever done anything like this. It's the first time I'm aware of any club doing something like this. So kudos to everybody that's involved in that. So give yourselves a round of applause, Joe's. So, if I may, I'm going to kick it off. Mark, would you just give the people a brief intro as to who you are, please?
I sat in the wrong seat one night and met Mick Brown, and now I'm here. I suppose I cook. Well, I don't cook anymore, but I'm a culinary director with a company that serves and looks after some of the top companies around Dublin. Do a little bit of coaching. Don't coach as much anymore because I now sit and talk shite with you on a regular basis. And that's really it. But I suppose my biggest buzz is making people better and trying to understand how I make myself better in that journey.
Very good. Thanks, Mark. Ian?
Yeah, my background, moved to UK when I was 15, played over there for 13 and a half years or so, moved back to Ireland, continued playing for further 3 years, went into coaching, head of youth development, and then moved into a senior management role within League of Ireland. So gone full circle, and I moved back from the UK in 2015. I ended up coaching back in Joey's, and then now I'm back coaching in Joey's again.
Brilliant, thanks. Steve?
All right, that high performance word, don't forget it. That's all I'm going to say. That word is important. So wherever you've put it, make sure you put it under that light. I'm done.
Nice. Excellent. So look, guys, we've talked tonight a lot about culture, and I know it's very important to Joe's in terms of the culture that you have and the culture that you're continually trying to improve. So we've all just recently watched the Euros. Guys, can I throw it open to you? Did you see any examples that jumped out at you of teams that you say, hey, there's a good culture there? Or the opposite, teams that you said, hang on a minute, there's a bad culture there?
I don't think the Euros was a good example to use to talk about culture. I think that the teams and the players, where they're coming from, international squads are very rarely the same squads every window. So players building up that relationship, they might not have played with each other, they might not have done that, and especially at that level. I think you touched on it earlier with social media. Players now have their own PR teams behind them. They might be pushing whatever they're pushing. The media jumps in as well. I think you use Bellingham. I think the media were pushing Bellingham for his promo with his kits and the ads he was using. So I think there's a lot of pressure within that environment, and all the players read what's going on, see what's going on, and there's lads there who've just come off a 60-game season. They haven't kicked the ball at the Euros, and trying to keep them happy as well. So I think talking about like a team culture is, in my opinion, really difficult at the Euro level.
I also think it's really difficult to actually talk about seeing culture when you're watching it from TV and it's sanitized, because I have real issues when fans and people go on about they haven't got the right attitude. You haven't got a clue what's going on behind closed doors, what's happening in a camp, how a person is feeling, and you're not talking about the actual individual. So I look at someone like Portugal and everybody lashing the likes of Ronaldo because of his behaviour. But you don't know the dynamic, what's going on behind the team, but we're all made so quick to make judgments. I actually thought the English team had a really, really excellent culture, because no matter what was thrown at them, they seemed to bond and stick together, and you could see the reaction even from their own fans and pillaring them, but they still stuck together as a group. But it's easy for us to draw snapshots and stick up posters on dressing rooms and talk about culture and unity and all like that. For me, when you look for a good set of culture, you're talking about people who are honest and accountable with each other, and also just trying to make each other better. So I do agree with Ian. I don't think that was evident in a lot of the teams, but I think probably the teams like Georgia, who probably pushed themselves and had a plan and had a game plan to play with, they probably epitomised it better than some of the bigger nations.
Very good. Steve, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just going to touch on it. I don't know anything about the culture of a country, so I'm not going to pretend, because I don't know. But I'm going to talk about the emotional intelligence of the traditional professional football player, which is varied. Some players will be respectful when they don't play, and some will act like they are 9 years old. And it weirds me out a little bit, because I'm like, you're quite selfish. And so the culture aspect is really challenging, because professional footballers have been conditioned that when they don't play, they act like they're 9. And I just don't think it's appropriate or acceptable. And then you move across to rugby, and there's just a different mentality from, again, my lens. So culture is really, I guess we can be top down, but actually I'm just going to reflect on bottom up and linking it to you as coaches. What can you do to educate your players on just being good people? And the final thing I'm going to say is these players go from the best at their club to then number 18 in their country and have never really been dropped, which is why we get this spoilt behaviour. So again, it always goes back to emotional intelligence, right? Always goes back to that, right? And bouncing back from not being special all the time.
Brilliant, thanks. I think from talking to Carol the other day, it was really evident that it's very important that there's highly motivated and highly qualified coaches in Joe's for the betterment of the players. And that's evident tonight by the amount of you that are here and giving up your free time on a Friday night to come and listen to people and try and learn something. So the question to the panel is, 1, why is it important to have highly motivated leaders? And 2, how do we keep them highly motivated?
I think the first thing that to be highly motivated, you have to know what your why is. Why do you do it? Because it's not easy, and you get little or no reward out of it. You don't get a financial reward out of it, so why do you do it? And if you sit there and you mention trophies, or you mention winning, or you mention any of those things, that's not the right way to do it. So to have the right people in the club, that's the ones that's going to set the DNA. They're the ones that are going to educate the kids as they go through the years. They're going to ones that are going to educate those kids to become better as individuals, not necessarily just as football players. Your job as a coach is to make people better. I was very, very lucky, and I know I'd get Celtic into the equation somewhere tonight. I was very lucky to work with someone called Martin Miller at Celtic, who taught me something very, very valuable. And it got nothing to do with formations, and it got nothing to do with how systems of play. But he taught me that every kid was a project. And your job as a coach, to be the best coach, was to fill that kids with this imaginary backpack that you filled with experiences, knowledge, and emotional intelligence, so that not even on a football pitch, but off a pitch and in life, they could reach into that backpack and draw out those experiences. So the very, very best coaches do that. Now, I happen to know a couple of them that sit around this room, some who've had a major impact on me, someone who've become friends, and they're the ones that don't necessarily talk about the result on a Saturday or a Sunday night, but talk about the performance, talk about the attitude, talk about the application, and talk about the enjoyment and the experiences. So I think to be the very best coach, that's the kind of skill sets that you start with. Everything else can be taught. You can teach systems and plays. And I hate to break it to you, as someone who has coached at a certain level, the biggest lesson I learned was having to go and apologise to my own son for making mistakes in dropping him or not picking him, because I actually thought that was the right thing to do, so that I was proven to other coaches to be fair, without actually thinking about my son and his development. So I think if you're aware of your own self, and if you're aware of what your job is, and you take yourself without being too serious, that's what a high-performing coach is for me.
Boys, you want to jump in on that?
I suppose the biggest thing is love of the game. Like, my missus was on to me, well, are you going to get involved? And my son is playing, and I love it. Like, getting involved, getting on the pitch, seeing the players smile, making them better all the time, just giving them tools. And you touched on it earlier, Steve, in terms of knowing what you're good at, because everyone can give a player something. And if you're not brilliant on the balls, bibs and cones piece, but you're brilliant at making the kids happy, making them smile, keeping them motivated, keeping the mood up, that's just as important, because you can focus loads and loads on, oh yeah, I have to have the best drill and playing out from the back and we're going to do this. But if the players aren't enjoying themselves, you're not going to get anywhere near the execution that you want out.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm just going to relay it to what I said at the first speech, we not me. Model the behaviour that you want to see. I'll stand by this quote, children won't let you care about them until they know that you care. But why would adults be any different? Just be caring, be kind. And I think, again, it's kids, I'm going to chuck this out to you here, really. My advice to you is just really focus on your character and who you are and how you behave and the questions that you ask. Because I don't think often we teach asking good questions. We just ask questions. So coaches, really think about the types of questions you ask, open or closed questions, and kids, think about the type of questions that you ask to create critical thinking, to then get the 4 and 4, the 5 and 3, the 6 and 2, and the 7 and 1. Because it might be that you get the 4 and 4 and that kid gets the 5 and 3, and we find our own different way to be successful. So that's what I'd link it to learning.
Brilliant. The videos that you guys have shown throughout the night have been excellent in terms of backing up the message and the power of those messages. I thought it was amazing to see the kids answering earlier, and they mightn't necessarily say the things that we think are important, because naturally as adults and competitive adults who've played at all different levels of the game, winning is very high up on the agenda. But hearing the kids talk about, I'm with my friends, it's changed my life. Like, my God, for a child to say that about football, it's phenomenal. I love my coach. I love meeting my mates every week. I love training. I love being fit. They're phenomenal things, and I think they're important in a child-friendly environment. So, kids feel safe and want to come here. But I just want to throw this one out to the floor, if I may. What do you guys think is important to create a child-friendly environment? And don't be shy. It's not a quiz. We're not trying to catch anybody out. Just throw out a couple of words that you think is important to create that child-friendly environment. And players, feel free to jump in. Enjoyment. Why would you do anything in your life that you didn't enjoy? You know, when things become a chore, you get burnt out pretty quickly. So it has to be enjoyable. I still say that to the coaches and players that I work with now in the League of Ireland. Why show up every week if you're not enjoying it? Because you don't give the best to yourself if you're not enjoying it. So great answer. Anyone else? Oh, totally. Yeah, brilliant. If we could all adapt that mindset, that's a brilliant place to be. I said to somebody earlier when I walked in, nobody has ever asked me the result of the under-14 league from 12 years ago. No one.
You lost that one.
Maybe I did. But no one has ever done that. So, you know, the things that we think are important generally aren't. And a lot of the time it's you mentioned ego, Steve, earlier. Get the ego out of the way. Ego can be the enemy because the adult feels hurt. 9 times out of the 10, the kids go bouncing out of the place, whether they've won, lost or drawn. So I think that's just important to keep in mind.
Just a quick one on that. The best example I ever had when I started coaching down in Arklow, I was the under 10s and I had my team plan, everything in, players all set up, really, really serious. And we were out and I looked down and I looked to the right and there was the goalkeeper and the centre back sitting down making daisy chains. That was the day I realised all the planning in the world went out the window and it was about, listen, they'll find their own way.
Totally. So look, moving on, we hear in Irish sport a lot team spirit. And I hear that regularly, oh, they've great team spirit. And I think we all have an idea of what that is. But in terms of these young players that we're talking about tonight, what would you guys say? You know, how would you define team spirit?
Just a feeling, isn't it? It's a feeling. You walk in the changing room, you walk in a school building, you walk in a business, you walk in your home and you see smiles, don't you? You see warmth. Go back to my first time here. It's quite nervous for me, by the way, when you turn up. I act like I'm not nervous because that's my job, but you walk in and you just meet people that smile. That's what it's about, isn't it?
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's, as we say, it's having a bit of crack, isn't it? It's turning up, seeing your mates there, essentially getting that bond. And there's little pieces even, it can be quite daunting, especially this time of year. You have new players coming in, you have maybe players coming in for open sessions, or there's a new environment, things are changing. And like little things, you try to actually get them to talk to each other. Little thing I've implemented is always like go get a water break, have a drink, and I just say to one of the players, like, you make sure everyone's ready and then you all come back in together. So just picking a different person, so they have to actually go around the group and have a chat and go, are you ready, right? If you're not ready, we have to wait, and then we'll all come back in together, just to make sure they're kind of doing that. Because I hear it all the time now, they're talking into the PS5 controller. So sometimes they're not talking to each other as socially as you might want them to. But just little pieces to try and, for us as coaches, to set that scene, to open your mouth, to become a little bit more comfortable with each other.
I was very lucky, again, at Arklow United when I coached them from 8s to 18s. I worked with Willie Tyrrell there, who came in, who was so much better at the footballing side of things, and I needed help. But I remember you remember saying to the team, and they were about 17, and he was telling them that you really don't realise how lucky you guys are, because you're playing with your mates and you will never get this again. You may go to other teams, you may win other things and everything else, but these moments, a bit like the pictures you were showing earlier on, they didn't care. They won things and they didn't win things, but they didn't actually really care about that. The feeling that they had is where they could trust each other, they felt they could be themselves, they felt comfortable, they felt respected, and they felt involved. That meant so much more to them than who played, what we won, or how we didn't did. Now, as they got older, they changed and other things came into their life. But I think if you can create that unique environment where they feel that they belong and they can be themselves, that's a real team spirit that nothing else can actually top.
You mentioned respect there, and having been involved in this club for a great number of years with a great bunch of people, both coaches and player-wise, a number of years ago, respect was one of our core values. And I know that it remains. When I saw the club's, vision and mission statement and stuff like that recently, it resonated a lot with how we behaved with each other and what we would have expected from each other. Other things I know that are important in the club are integrity and accountability. When we say we're going to do stuff, it's important that we do it, that we just don't make this lip service. So I'm interested to know, guys, if you could pick maybe one value that you guys would, hold dearly and that you think is important for a football club, what would that value be?
I think like respect is huge.
Yeah.
But it's how you build that. Like, I think it's great and you see everyone, and the handshake is obviously like great handshake, but sometimes it's like token. It's like hand flop down, whatever it is, it doesn't mean anything. So it's actually getting a little bit deeper than that. And like the knowledge of people around the club, especially here, and for players to understand, like you might just go through Joey's and you might not be a professional footballer, but you might go into an industry where you're expert, you're top, and the people around here that have that experience, have that knowledge, also have connections to help you.
Yeah.
It's kind of making sure you kind of understand that respect of the people that are coaching you, what they've come from, what their backgrounds, how they speak, how they carry themselves. And that will reflect within the club. And I think it's really important to get beyond just kind of, we do the shaking hands and that's it. It has to go a little bit deeper in terms of educating the kids on this is how you act, the accountability, responsibility, a bit of integrity behind it, and actually what is that, not just words on a wall.
I know Mark talks about that a lot. Don't just put words on a wall. Make sure people are living them. And if they're not, call them out, hold people to account, and then ultimately everybody rises together. So yeah, great answer. Mark?
Honesty. And I don't think people put enough emphasis on that. So as a parent, being totally honest about what you expect from the coaches, but also what you expect from your own child, and being honest about where you think they're actually really going to go. The amount of parents I've encountered over the years who have aspirations that you're just, I mean this very respectfully, you're way off, where you just let your child enjoy playing. Honestly, from coaches, like some coaches, and I'm not talking about this club as such, but I've come across so many coaches over the years who lie to parents and lie to kids about how they're going to do this and going to get them to this level just to keep them in the team, when probably the best thing to do is, because they're good enough, is to step on to the next level. And honestly, from the club to actually know where their place is and what they want to achieve and actually set that out and live by it. Now, I remember when I got started with this, the top 2% will always get looked after, whether that's through development programs, League of Ireland academies, or if they're really good enough to go the whole way. But the other 98% are equally, if not more important, because they're the ones that drive the club. So I think honesty about what's expected of you as a person, as a coach, as a player, as a parent is huge for me. And for a lot of parents, that's a real struggle, because they don't always see their own son of what that ability is and learn to appreciate and love what they do, whether that's under 3B, Division 8, or whether that's senior level, whatever. So I think honesty is a huge one for me.
Very good. Steve, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I can't give you a word because I don't think there is one. I'm going to give you two words which we all know about, which is education and intelligence. Now, intelligence is a bit of a flawed word because we assume intelligence is formal intelligence, schools. And if formal intelligence was really effective, then every single doctor, lawyer, solicitor, teacher would all be really good, wouldn't they? But we know they're not. Fact. Right? They get a degree, some of them are good, some of them are not. So I think the informal education piece is key, because intelligence should be measured about how we behave, how you act and how you interact. That's how intelligence should be measured, but it's not. It's measured too formally. So if we look at just general behaviours of how we measure intelligence, and I'll tie this in, there are educated people that are not intelligent and intelligent people not educated. So the words that we need to use is behaviour, because behaviour defines, for me, culture and how people act and how they interact. People that don't see, they look at you but they're not really listening to anything that you're saying, but they've got a degree. Well, then you're not intelligent in my eyes. So I think that being more present, bringing that back, and it's quite hard for me today as an example. There's a lot of people I'm meeting, everyone's like bang, 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 and I'm trying to stay present. Whereas at 25, I wouldn't have known to try and stay present. I just would have, so I'm trying to give people time. And yeah, my challenge to everyone, including myself, is trying to be present. All right, try and stay in the now, because the now is the only bit we can really influence.
Brilliant. I'm conscious of people's time, and people have been very respectful with their time, but I'd love, with us sitting here and with so much other experience in the room, I'd love to throw it open to the floor and say, are there any burning questions? There's been so many good messages tonight. I've been scribbling notes all night, but there's always something you'll miss, or there's always something that you'll kind of walk away going, I don't fully understand that. I should have asked, what does that mean? So is there anything out there, even from the players, that you'd love to ask, or from the parents or coaches? And we'll offer you an opinion if we can. Hand down the back. Yes, sir.
How do you think we should manage parents?
Parents are a hugely important part of any kid's journey, right? Whether that's in school or football or life in general. And from a football point of view, the only thing, and I can only speak from my experience on this, you got to be open, you got to communicate well, and you got to communicate consistently. So you can't say one thing to one parent and something totally different to another. So if you're fair and consistent, players see that, because they'll say, okay, well, he treats everybody the same. And if somebody does something that's out of alignment with what the group's meant to do, you have that honest conversation. But there's a constant education piece. You can't just say to somebody that you meet for the first time, who's entrusting you with one of their most precious things in the world, yeah, I'll look after him, and here's how I'm going to do things, and then never talk to them again. because things change and every kid progresses differently, as we know. So it's just important that you're honest, not brutally honest, that's very different, but honest and be consistent. But be true to what you say you believe in. So if you have a philosophy and a way of doing things, stick with that. Then people may still disagree with you, and that's allowed because we're adults, but at least you've been fair and true to what you've said you're going to do. And that's the only advice I could give you.
I think as well, when you're talking about parents, it's again, you might give them the answer that they don't want to be here, and that's okay. But you have to be comfortable in the fact that they may decide that they don't like your answer, so they're going to go, they take their child elsewhere, or they're going to behave in a different way. That's also okay, because that's not reflection on you. So once you're consistent in your message, how you deliver it is respectful, and you're factual. So it's a bit like the exercise around the Fs. Once you're completely factual and you can stand over by getting opinions from people around and people that you know and people that you trust, but also people that will challenge your decision on a kid as well. So over my years of doing this, and again, I haven't coached at the very highest level, I've always just tried to be very open, honest and factual. And if they don't like my response, I can still look myself in the mirror and say, well, I did what I was supposed to do was right.
Good question. Yes, Michael Brown.
I'd just like to know, is there any way that we can help
you can
certainly build resilience?
Oh, wow. How long have you got? That's a great question.
Do you want the recorded version or the unrecorded version?
No, that is a great question.
Strongly about it.
Yeah.
I think times have changed. Kids are exposed to a lot of stuff earlier than they used to be. And I think parents are more involved in their kids' lives now than ours were. So times change and we have to change. So
Parents in the room, hands up if you're a parent in the room, whether you're a coach or not. If you're a parent in the room and you've got a kid in your life, great. So if I was to say to you, how many of you guys want a resilient child? How many would put their hand up? Throw it out there. Why?
I think when you look at that now, is like you have to love them enough to let them fail.
Yeah,
and
it's a great question.
You can't just keep protecting them all the time. You have to let them fail. Obviously, it's in context of football and environment, but you have to let them fail. And even as coaches, I know you mentioned about coach being a little bit vulnerable. Like, you have to put on sessions sometimes that you know is not going to be the greatest session in the world, but you have to let them get through it. And you have to put your ego aside to say, other coaches might be watching me here and it's not going to look the prettiest. You have to let them go through that. You have to let them feel that little bit of pain. Because if you keep protecting them and all of a sudden you get into the adult world and you're into 16, 17, you're 18, you're looking for a job and you've not let them feel that bit of hurt and let them build that resilience to deal with them kind of pressures, you're taking a little bit away from them, I believe.
Very good.
I'm going to bring back my school days. Again, school's not very glamorous, is it? But it's the most powerful place I've ever worked because there's lots of intelligent people, generally, all doing intelligent things to the best of our ability. And I'm going to touch on two bits of language: strategic stress and strategic safety. And that sweet spot between making your kid feel safe, feel good, and feel stressed, don't know the answers, but just giving you that bit of language. And linking back to, we used to have back to basics week at school. So best head teachers I worked under, every 6 weeks we'd literally have in a diary, basically, behaviour gets loose, winter comes, behaviour gets loose. And we'd have back to basics weeks, which meant, when I mean strategy, we're not just making it up to be arsey this week. We're putting in our diary, the whole leadership team and the whole school know, the teachers, not the kids, this is back to basics week. Ties, uniform, planners, timekeeping, all the basics, just to get everything back in the mix. And then what that means is, when we're strategic about it, we're not just turning up in a bad mood and just being rude to kids. Does that make sense? So just all those little 1%ers really around strategic influence. And linking to the gentleman there about what can clubs do about parents, I think I work with like a few junior clubs in London, and strategically, let me apply this, operationally they're really good. Like, what that means is loads of good people like yourselves, all good coaches and whatever, but there's loads of misalignment in the football clubs because the clubs respectfully are volunteers, right? So the club's not a school. You're not chucking out emails saying, well, we are inclusive, we are sport for all, we are equal in terms of time on the pitch and all that, which then causes grey areas, doesn't it? So my challenge to all clubs is to be more black and white about the philosophy of the football club. That then means operationally coaches stop having shit conversations with parents every week, because the DNA of the football club has been set. This is what we do and this is who we are. So that would be my advice, making it cleaner, clearer, website, letters, emails, just to make sure there's alignment between player, coach and parent.
I think to go back to that resilient bit that Mick alluded to, I think I'm big into I'm big into language and how we talk with kids, and what we see as failure that they may not, and then what parents see as failure. So if we stop using words like failure and we allow them to make mistakes and we allow them to be expressive, we allow them to understand that they can't get everything that they want and they won't always achieve everything they feel they should be achieved. And if we can create that kind of environment, maybe they themselves will start to change. And I think the biggest thing for me is parents are too quick to get involved and try and make a decision for kids. But you as a coach, as always a parent as well, you have to be mindful as well that what you say, what you do, and how you hold yourself has a huge bearing on that. So let them figure it out. Let them work it out. And, you know, what is failure? How do you define success? That's a big one for me. I remember coaching at a young age and someone saying, have you had a successful year? And I went, yeah, hugely successful. Oh, really? What did you win? Pardon my language, but absolutely fuck all. But you know what? We started with 15 kids. I finished with the same 15 kids. That one couldn't head a ball, but he does now. And that one couldn't use his left foot. And now we can. Yeah. Massively successful. Are they going to win the Champions League? No, the hell they're not, but they're usually successful. So define success, manage failure, and use those right words, and allow that environment to kind of give them proper feedback and criticise them in the right way, but in a way that you can feel that there's a mindset that they can learn from.
Very good.
I think just as well, you need to drive as well, drive standards. So there's a lot as well you can talk about, you need to cater for everyone. I think a lot of times we don't cater for the top ones now because we're trying to bring everything down to inclusive, but you've got to cater for them top ones as well. It's easier to get from a C to a B than it is to get to a B to an A. To get really in there, and you need to provide that, whether it's training or that level of information or support, whatever it may be. You need to have that for them kind of players as well, because you can talk about we want to be inclusive and more for everyone, but they're still part of everyone. They just might need a little bit more.
Of course. Yeah, very good. If anybody's interested in particular work on resilience, I'll come to that. There is a guy, Gordon McClelland, we're checking out. He has a company called Working with Parents in Sport. And he is a parent, and his language and his teaching is all about helping parents navigate the sporting journey. Because we send our kids out on this sporting journey sometimes, not realising that we're an integral part of that journey as well, and we play a vital part in it. So Gordon, certainly any of his works are worth looking at. And he talks about resilience very, very well, and gives some really good practical examples of things that we do, sometimes inadvertently, not realising that we're not helping the kids. Conscious of time, folks. So maybe one more question. Someone asked a question. Yes, Mark?
Gav, I just wanted to ask a question on something that's not really spoken very much about in boys football. Year in, year out, there's 450 boys roughly in this club. Okay, a lot of them, or some of them, will go to England. To suggest that none of those boys are gay, all right, it's mental. So I want to ask the question. Number one, do you think those boys can go to England or any country, any higher level football, and fulfil their full level, knowing they're gay and they can't say it because of the stigma attached to it in football? And also, just how would you go about letting the boys, and I say boys simply because of the fact that it seems to be more open with girls. They've no problem saying they're gay. Okay, well that's what I see anyway. So the question I'm asking is, how do we go about letting the boys know it's okay to be gay and play football? And it has to start young. I personally feel it has. I asked this question 10 years ago in the club. Geez, you can't open that can of worms. The FA can't solve that. Fuck the FA. We're Joey's, we'll do it.
Look, I think it's back to everything. We're living in a very different world now than we did even a year ago. And things have changed. I think back to when I grew up playing football, first, in the 80s, 90s, it was a very different environment. And certainly there was lots of things that there was stigma about and taboos. But what I'm seeing, and I'm dealing now currently with probably slightly older players, under 20s in particular, who are a hell of a lot more open and willing to come and tell you stuff, sometimes in confidence, sometimes very happy to share stuff with the group. And the group are much more accepting of that now, because we've tried to foster and encourage that environment. And I've had people come to me with stuff about addiction, about their sexuality, about their family situations. So it's not just being gay. And our job as coaches and educators and guardians of these people is to make sure that they feel safe. Steve mentioned the word safety earlier, but also to make sure that we deal with them at the level of our experience and qualification, and also help them find other people if we're not fully qualified to deal with that. But certainly I would encourage, whatever is going on in your club, talk about stuff. and get it out in the open, because it is a different society now. It's going to be a very different society in another 5 years. We have to be prepared for that. So I don't have the perfect answer for you on that, but I would always suggest education is key, communication is key, and just getting that right support network and framework around people is so important. Because of course there's people out in society who are gay who are in football. You know, and you're right, slowly but surely we're starting to see some people come out and be brave enough to come out. But yeah, it's going to happen. So it's no harm that you have a way of dealing with that. But again, it's whether it's that issue or any other, I would approach them in the same way. One, be respectful, treat whatever they tell you in confidence until they want you to speak to other people, and get the right people involved, people who are qualified to deal with that kind of thing as well. So I hope that helps.
I'm just going to give, I think it's a brilliant question and a brave one. So well done. The word I'm going to use is inclusivity rather than exclusivity. And the opposite of ignorance, you know, is probably something like open-minded. The lens all goes back, really. And I think if we can be inclusive in our thinking, that's going to link to what we do and how we do, and what we know and how we know. But you've got to think first, right? And so it's a great question, because I think being an inclusive person is a truly beautiful trait, because it means that you're the opposite of ignorant. You welcome. And if we link to the KPIs of the club, being inclusive and sport for all, and I link it to my school days where we used to have agendas called Every Child Matters. Every child really does matter. And so we can do all this proving and winning matches, but the bit really that matters is how does your sub feel? And I don't say it like literally sub, but cultures are only as good as your weakest link, everyone. Let me remind you of that. And I mean elite level sport as well. If your sub is buzzing to come on like Mr. Klopp's subs do, and they play 10 minutes a season, they still give him a cuddle at the end, I'm thinking, what's he doing Monday to Friday to get that level of behaviour? Like, he's not fluking that. Something's going on. So it's all relative to people's behaviour at the end of the day. And I think it's a brilliant question, because I think the inclusivity of clubs at this level, I think, is the beauty of it. It is really everyone's club, isn't it? And so when I say we, not me, I don't joke about it. It really should be that and could be that. So yeah, great point.
Brilliant. On that note, I think that's a fantastic question to end on. All I can do from myself, Mark, Ian, Steve, is thank Carol, Mick, everyone else who was involved in the putting of this event together. It's been a fantastic event, guys. You should be very, very proud of yourselves. To the players, well done for sticking through all those adults talking. Well done, kids. And then finally, look, thank you all as adults for giving up the Friday night and chatting. I hope you've taken something away from the night. We certainly have, and I look forward to following Joe's into the future.
Make sure you listen to the podcast.
Good night. Thank you.
That's it, folks. The end of this very special live edition. We hope you enjoyed it, and you'll come and see us in person for some more events like this in 2025. And remember, when it comes to coaching, there's no right or wrong way, but there's always a better way.